Many healthcare advances that have shaped modern life have their origins at Johnson & Johnson, founded by three brothers in 1886. To tell that story, we have to go back to the beginning, in 1861, at the start of the American Civil War. Crystal Lake, Pennsylvania. A family with 11 children and 2 sons already in the Union Army wanted to keep their third son safe and out of the conflict. So they sent 16-year-old Robert Wood Johnson to apprentice in the apothecary shop owned by relatives in upstate New York. Their decision changed the course of young Robert's life. His apprenticeship turned into a lifelong mission to improve healthcare. In 1873, Robert Wood Johnson, now 28 years old, formed a medical products business with a man named George Seabury. In 1876, the United States celebrated its 100th birthday with the Centennial Exhibition, a World's Fair in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Robert attended, representing Seabury and Johnson. While he was there, Robert heard a lecture given by the noted English surgeon Sir Joseph Lister. In the 1860s, operating rooms were not sterile and surgical survival rates were tragically low. Lister had taken Louis Pasteur's discovery that invisible germs cause infection and applied it for the first time to surgery. Lister's radical idea that surgery should be sterile inspired the now 31-year-old Robert Wood Johnson with a new business opportunity: to manufacture the first mass-produced sterile surgical dressings and sterile sutures, and save the lives of surgery patients. Robert Wood Johnson's business partner was reluctant to take a chance on the risky new innovation of making sterile surgical products. So in 1885, Robert and his young brothers James and Edward Mead left and made plans to start their own company. January of 1886 found James Wood Johnson on a train from New York to Philadelphia. When the train stopped in New Brunswick, he noticed a for rent sign on a small 4-story former wallpaper factory near the railroad tracks. Getting off the train to take a closer look, he rented it for Johnson & Johnson. The little startup began with just 14 employees, founded on the revolutionary innovation of mass-producing sterile surgical dressings, sterile sutures, and of promoting antiseptic surgery as a way of saving lives. The new company in 1886 offered a very different business philosophy of the day, one of openness and transparency, of responding to needs in society, and a working partnership with the medical profession.
We are all fortunate in that we are engaged in manufacturing products to be used throughout the world for the relief of pain and suffering. Robert Wood Johnson.
The first products were medicinal plasters, which delivered medicine directly through the skin. Sterile surgical dressings and sterile sutures came next, followed by one consumer product, a tooth cream called Zahnweiss, meaning white teeth in German. Robert would walk through the town of New Brunswick, striking up conversations with the local business owners. On one such occasion, he entered the Opera House Pharmacy and took an immediate liking to the pharmacist, Fred B. Kilmer. Johnson and Kilmer shared an interest in Sir Joseph Lister's theories and a passion to improve healthcare. Eventually, Robert persuaded him to join Johnson & Johnson, where Kilmer became the scientific director from 1889 to 1934. Working closely with the Johnson brothers, Kilmer helped set Johnson & Johnson on the path it follows today. From the beginning, the Johnson brothers were astute in using information to grow the business. In 1888, Johnson & Johnson published Modern Methods of Antiseptic Wound Treatment, a how-to manual on sterile surgery with articles by the leading antiseptic surgeons of the day. As the need evolved to sterilize our mass-produced surgical products, Johnson & Johnson pioneered steam sterilization in 1891. The mass-produced sterile surgical products caused a revolution in surgery, changing it from a last resort to a mainstay in the treatment of injury and disease. Johnson & Johnson brought sterile surgery to the United States and across the world. Johnson & Johnson expanded rapidly, with success leading to new products, many as a result of consumer feedback. When Fred Kilmer heard that a doctor's patient was complaining of irritated skin after removing a medicated plaster, Kilmer sent the doctor a small container of talc to soothe the patient's skin. A container of talc was then included with some plasters made to alleviate any irritation. Consumers replied that not only did the powder soothe the irritation from the plasters, it also soothed their baby's diaper rash. So, in 1894, Johnson's baby powder was put on the market, giving birth to our baby products business. The tradition continued with a medical need facilitating the beginning of a successful product. In 1920, the wife of a Johnson & Johnson employee named Earl Dixon was clumsy in the kitchen, enduring minor cuts and scratches while cooking. Earl had the idea to create a ready-made bandage to aid in his wife's healing. Although they're a part of everyone's medicine cabinet today, Band-Aid brand adhesive bandages were originally such a new concept that nobody knew how to use them. First aid became a great need in the country, spurred on by the building of the Transcontinental Railroad in the late 1800s. While traveling through the Rocky Mountains by train, Robert Wood Johnson struck up a conversation with the railway surgeon. The surgeon said that railroad workers were often injured from accidents in remote areas and far away from medical help. Robert listened, and in response, Johnson & Johnson created the first aid kits. These were followed in 1901 with the first aid manuals, researched and written by Fred Kilmer. As the new year of 1910 began, Johnson & Johnson was almost 25 years old. The company continued to expand with growing product lines and a thriving export business. Therefore, the sudden passing of company founder Robert Wood Johnson that January, after a brief and unexpected illness, came as a shock. Fred Kilmer, in writing about his good friend, said,
"When once convinced that an article which he could manufacture would save life and prevent suffering, he caused it to be manufactured and placed before the medical profession, irrespective of any consideration of profit."
James Wood Johnson took over as president. He and the management team his brother had put in place ensured that Johnson & Johnson continued with the same business philosophy of putting patients and consumers first. Following his father's death, Robert's teenage son, also named Robert Wood Johnson, joined the company full-time, beginning as a mill hand in the company's powerhouse. Robert shared his father's passion. He worked hard and learned quickly. Developing an easy rapport with the workers, they adopted him as one of their own. In 1911, the company was producing 90% of all the cotton, gauze, and bandages used throughout the world. A decade later, with the understanding of how important a global economy would be in healthcare, young Robert and his brother Seward took a year-long worldwide research trip to assess business conditions. Robert strongly believed that global decentralized expansion would help us grow into the future. He knew that locally managed operating companies were closer to their customers and markets, and it served his motto, "Be as local as you can be." Robert moved into the leadership role at Johnson & Johnson when his Uncle James retired in 1932. His leadership began during the depths of the Great Depression, when a sense of the world was greatly changed. Robert held fast to the fundamental business philosophy and governing values put in place by his father and uncles, and steered the company successfully through this dark time. His outspoken philosophy and his leadership attracted the notice of President Roosevelt. During World War II, Johnson was made a brigadier general and appointed by Roosevelt to lead the smaller War Plants Corporation in Washington, D.C. During the industrial era, Johnson was a lone voice talking about corporate social responsibility, and yet he would not be deterred. He continued to think, write, and speak openly about the social responsibilities of business.
Out of the suffering of the past few years has been born a public knowledge and conviction that industry only has the right to succeed where it performs a real economic service and is a true social asset. It is to the interest of modern industry to realize that service to its customers comes first, service to its employees and management second, and service to its stockholders last. General Robert Wood Johnson.
In 1943, Johnson published this set of principles as our credo. He declared that moving forward, our credo would be the guiding principles within the company's philosophy, putting patients and consumers, employees, and the community before our final responsibility to our stockholders. Our credo became the heart of the culture within Johnson & Johnson. It was in 1963 that Robert Wood Johnson stepped down as chairman and CEO. He had left an indelible mark. His successors have continued to increase our capacity to meet unmet needs in human health and care for the community, a legacy that goes back to the beginning of the company. During the Spanish-American War, the military asked Johnson & Johnson to develop and manufacture surgical dressings to treat wounded soldiers. When the need exceeded what the Army had contracted with us to produce, the management of Johnson & Johnson supplied additional dressings at no cost, because they were needed to save lives. 2 years later, when a devastating hurricane struck Galveston, Texas, Johnson & Johnson sent products and money to help the survivors. Within hours of the San Francisco earthquake in 1906, rail cars filled with Johnson & Johnson products were speeding to the West Coast, along with financial support. Our human response to these events marked the beginnings of our tradition of worldwide disaster relief and our global humanitarian efforts. Several decades ago, the community of New Brunswick was suffering a decline. During this period, our company had to decide where to locate the new world headquarters being built. The decision made was based on our credo commitment, and Johnson & Johnson remained in New Brunswick, forming a public-private partnership to revitalize the city, which has since become a national model. Our heritage helping the community also includes our tradition of employee volunteers, going back over 100 years, and it remains one of the traditions that unites our employees around the world. From our founding in 1886 to our broad base in human health care today, Johnson & Johnson continues to look for ways to save and improve lives. When we began, the great needs were for mass-produced sterile surgical products, first aid, and basic public and family health. As the decades passed, Johnson & Johnson grew and decentralized, expanding into new areas of health and technologies, identifying human needs and pioneering the development of products and businesses to meet them. Today, we continue to meet human health care needs in ways that the Johnson brothers and the first 14 employees who started our journey couldn't even begin to imagine. As we continue to build on their legacy, future generations at Johnson & Johnson will continue to care for the world in ways that we cannot even begin to imagine today. The world will continue to be healed, one person at a time. And the human element inherent in that makes all the difference.